And we're back to talk about arrays again. In the first section, when we talked about arrays, we said that they looked something like this. Square brackets, and we can put whatever we want. We'll just put in a few numbers here. So these are arrays, and we talked about the fact that we can do for loops with them. We can do for each with them, which was new in ECMAScript 5. And today we're going to learn a few more. But before we do that, let's remember how the for each works. Let's say we wanted to multiply every single number in the array. We can just do const, remember. Now we can just use our new ES6 syntax. And we can say that new array equals array dot for each, and it reads nicely, right? For each array, we are going to use a number, and we're going to use arrow function. Again, no more function word. Everything looks nicer this way with the fat arrow. And for each number in the array, we'll say number times 2. So multiply everything by 2. Now let's see what that gives us. Console.log new array. Undefined. Well, because that's not how for each works, right? For each just says, I'm going to loop over these elements and I'm going to multiply number by 2. But we're not changing the array. If we look at the array right now, well, it's still the same thing. 1, 2, 10, 16. We're just randomly multiplying the numbers by 2, but we're not really storing it anywhere. If we want to do what we're doing, then we have to say const double, and we'll say that double is an array, and then double dot push. So we're pushing onto the array as we loop through it, number times 2. Now let's see what double gives us. I save, I'm going to refresh, and look at that. I get 2, 4, 20, 32. Okay, now the ones we're going to talk about today is map, filter, and reduce. I would say that these three are probably the most important methods that you'll use in your day-to-day JavaScript. They're super useful, so really start to become familiar with them. And anytime you think of doing some sort of a loop, most likely you want to do one of these three. Let's start off with map. The above way of doubling each thing in the array and creating a new array, well, with map, we can do const map array dot map number is number times 2. And the way map works is that you always need to return something. Because what's different for map than it is for each, well, for each just loops over something and it just does whatever the function says. Versus with the array, we can do what we couldn't with for each, which is loop over each element, each number, and return a new array. Let me show you what I mean. Every time the array loops, so let's say over here, the first one is number 1. We return 1 times 2. That gets put into map array, which is now 2. And then we go to the next number, 2. 2 times 2 now gets added to the array. 10 times 2 gets added to the array. And 16 times 2 gets added to the array. So that's why we return it. And by doing this, if we console.log map array, and let's refresh here. Oh, and forgot a closing bracket here. Let's try that again. You see that map array, so the first one is double, and the second one is map array. we'll name these just so we know the difference. And let's just redo that all over again. By the way, you're wondering why I'm refreshing instead of just copy and pasting it down here. Well, that's because we're using const, it's saying array has already been declared. So have to refresh. But there you go, for each and map. Looking at these two, they seem to both be doing the same thing. But there's a critical difference between map and for each. And I'm here to tell you that whenever you want to loop, do a simple loop and take some action on something like an array, you want to use map over for each. With for each, the operation may do nothing. You can just leave this completely blank or do console log, because all for each cares about is to iterate, which is going one by one, to iterate over a collection of elements like 1, 2, 10, and 16, and apply whatever operation we tell it to on each element. Now, map, on the other hand, has a restriction on the operation. It expects the operation to return an element. So with map, with for each, you can have multiple lines of code doing all these crazy things, versus map. With map, you always have a return element. The map iterates, again, loops through over a collection of elements, applying the operation on each element. And then finally, storing the result of each invocation of the operation, that's this, into another collection, which is map array. In other words, map transforms the array. It creates a new array, which is map array, versus for each, which just does a whole bunch of actions based on the array. And what those actions aren't really that limited. If we want to return a new array, we have to create our own array and then push. And you might notice here something that we spoke about in the last section when we talked about advanced functions. And that is the idea of side effects. If we go back, with for each, you can do a whole bunch of side effects within the function. You can console log, you can create a new array, you can push to that array, you can return undefined. You saw that when we first did the for each, or even now, we're not really returning anything. So we're returning undefined. Versus with a map, all these side effects are theoretically gone. And because with a map, we have to return, let me just show you. If I don't return here, let's see what happens. I get map, undefined, 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 undefined. Right away, we know that we're doing something wrong that we need to return. And as we mentioned in the previous section, we've now created a pure function where there's no question about whether we return or not. We have inputs, a function with no side effects that just simply returns a value. Again, a very important concept. We want to keep things acting in an expected way. We don't want to have a piece of code that lives on a website, let's say for 4 years, and somebody comes along who doesn't know it intimately, and all of a sudden have all these side effects happen that they don't know about. Again, we want to write pure, simple functions, and that is what map allows us to do. And the other important thing is that we're not changing the array. This array stays the exact same with map because we're always just making a new copy of the array. We're never mutating the data. All right, so that was map. Let's bring back the return here, and let's bring back the console. I also want to show you that when you only have a single parameter with an arrow function, you can actually avoid the brackets. And again, because we're returning, and we're just returning a single line here, we can do shorthand, which is just this. How much cleaner does that look? Let's again test it out. There you go, everything's looking nice. Look at that difference between the map and the for each. The next one I'm going to show you is filter. Now with filter, we can say filter array. And as the name suggests, we can filter our array with a condition. In our case, we can say, let's return all the elements in the array that are above 5. So we can say number is greater than 5. And as with map, this returns a new array. So we have to return something because filter array is going to contain that information. So the way you read this is filter this array, which is up here, as you're going one by one. So number will be first 1. Return is 1 greater than 5. In this case, it's going to say that's false. So we're not going to add this into the filter array. Then it iterates to 2. Is 2 greater than 5? Nope, that's false. So it's not going to go into the filter array. Is 10 greater than 5? Yes, it is. Good. 10 is going to go into the filter array. And is 16 greater than 5? Yep. Then 16 is going to go into the array. And again, because it's just a single line, we can do short form here. And now if we console.log, and we'll say filter array, and refresh, we get the filter containing 10 and 16. If we do equals to 5, well, in that case, we get an empty array because nothing equals 5. So you can put any condition you want in here. If you had string and you want to see if it contains the word hello, well, you can do that as well. All you have to do is return true or false. If it returns false, it won't go into the array. If it returns true, well, it will go into the array. Very cool, very useful. What else do we have? Well, the last one I want to show you is reduce. And this is really, really powerful. You can do a lot with reduce. You can actually do filtering and mapping with reduce. So it's a really, really powerful method, but I'm going to show you one easy way to get you started. What we're going to do is we're going to say const reduce array equals, and again, this returns a new array. We say reduce, and reduce takes something called an accumulator and the number. Now, obviously, this can be any name. Sometimes you'll see ACC for accumulator. We'll just leave it like that for now so you can see. We know what number is. Number is 1, 2, 10, then 16. But what is accumulator? Well, accumulator is something where we can store the information that happens in the body of the function. Let me explain. Accumulator plus number. And again, because with reduce, we're returning an array, we have to return a value. And what we're saying here is that every time you iterate, so let's say the first go around, you have number 1. Accumulator plus number 1 equals, let's say if the accumulator is 0, then it'll equal 1 now. 0 plus 1 equals 1. When 2 comes around, we do 1 plus 2 because the accumulator remembers what was there previously. And then 10 comes around and you go 3 plus 10. Now, what is the accumulator? We haven't defined it anywhere. In reduce, after the function, you have a second parameter. And here we can specify what we want our accumulator to start with, the default value. In our case, let's say 0. Now, if I do console.log reduce and do reduce array, let's see what happens. We get reduce 29 because 10 plus 16 is 26 plus 3 is 29. If I change this to 5 and I copy and try this again, we get 34 because the starting number is now 5. Very cool. So that's it. I want you to remember these 3 methods because you're going to be using them a lot in your career. They're very, very useful. They're pure, which means every time we do an operation, whatever inputs we get in, it always returns a value and there are no side effects. And as you can see, they're very easy and simple to read. So get used to them and good luck with the exercises after this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.